Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Brandy Godsell. I'm co-founder and teaching artist of SAORI Arts NYC. We are so excited to be participating in New York Textile Month this year. It's a real honor for us to be here. So thank you for joining us. So a little bit of a background about SAORI. SAORI literally translates to Sa, meaning everything has its own integrity, Ori meaning weaving. And this is the translation of the Zen Japanese vocabulary. So the origins of SAORI are that it originated in Japan in the 1960s by a woman named Masai Jo. So Masai Jo was a 57-year-old housewife, and she was making kimonos and obis with traditional weavers, master weavers in Japan. And these were beautiful pieces. So they were very strict of following a pattern. There were no errors were allowed. Everything had to be in a very specific way of making. And through this process, Masai Jo had made a couple of quote unquote errors, right? So some knots in the yarn or skip threads. And she decided to just continue making because she thought that those imperfections were actually really beautiful. So this is very radical in a very different way of making than the traditional obi creating. And she took some of these obis that she made to a store in Kyoto to sell, and they actually did incredibly well. People were responding to it really well. And she was making some products, but she really wanted to share the philosophy with the world. That was really her mission. So she and her sons created the SAORI loom and patented this loom, which we're going to have a demo of later in the webinar, so you can see how it works and how different it is than traditional weaving methods. And the headquarters of SAORI are in Osaka, so you can visit them as well. And there are SAORI studios all over the world now. So it's been really, really incredible to be able to share SAORI. So SAORI Arts NYC is a nonprofit organization that originated in 2015. And before the pandemic, we were bringing the physical looms to day programs, hospitals, respite centers, art centers for people with disabilities across the US and primarily in New York City area. And it's been such an incredible journey. And we're so looking forward to sharing the programming with you later in this webinar as well, so you can see what we've been doing and see the artwork that has been created through our programming. Feel free to check our website at saoriartsnyc.org and also our Instagram at saoriartsnyc and Facebook saoriarts.nyc. So we'll put that in the chat so you can take a look at that as well. So I'm going to introduce Maureen to you, who is a board member and treasurer of SAORI Arts NYC, and she's going to show you a short video as well as demo on the loom.
Right. Hello, welcome everyone. As Brandy said, I'm going to show you a short video that will tell you a little bit about our programming prior to the pandemic.
Do you know what you want to do today? Any ideas?
Dog.
A dog? Okay. What color do you want your dog?
SAORI Arts NYC is dedicated to encouraging people with life-limiting conditions to discover inner creativity through freestyle weaving. This philosophy embraces imperfections and encourages weavers to express themselves freely.
Okay, change feet.
The SAORI loom is designed to be easy to use and adaptable for physical disabilities. A SAORI teaching artist can demonstrate the basic steps in a few moments so that anyone, no matter what their abilities, is able to weave. There are no expectations, no rules, no restrictions, and no mistakes.
Put it like that.
Just to see someone grow and become enthusiastic, but also to see them become calm and have the time pass in a very pleasant way. It makes my day to come here.
What does it feel like when you do this?
It feels like an exercise sometimes, and sometimes it just makes you feel free.
It's just so magical to see how somebody else can take what you've taught them and go in a totally different direction, be totally independent. SAORI gives people the opportunity to express themselves, to find themselves, and to lose themselves.
As Brandy said, we work with people with disabilities of all kinds. Some of them have physical disabilities, some of them have more mental or chronic illnesses. So our goal is to have these people enjoy an activity. We believe strongly that everyone has the right to experience the well-being of making art. And too often the populations we work with are marginalized and don't have those opportunities. And that has even gotten worse since the pandemic started. At any rate, this is the loom we use, the SAORI loom. As you can see, it's folded up, which is great for storage and great for transport because we bring these looms to the programs most often that we are weaving at. So it's 35 pounds, so it's not exactly portable, but it's doable. And it opens very easily, releasing a latch with your foot. So when we come to weave with people, we bring a variety of yarns because we want people to have a lot of choices to express themselves. I'm going to share a better view of the loom itself. When we come to a program, the loom is already set up with a warp. The warp are these vertical threads that go through harnesses and through the reed and then are used to weave on. This is a very simple loom because it just has two harnesses. The harnesses are activated by foot pedals. So I press down one foot pedal and one harness goes down and opens a shed, a space between alternating warp threads. And the other pedal brings down the other harness, which opens the different shed. When people are weaving, it's interesting because most people haven't woven before. So they really have no expectations of what the end product is going to look like. This is actually great because it leaves them open to exploring and experimenting with different things. The first thing we'll do is we'll ask them to choose a color. And we have glittery yarns, different color yarns, different thickness yarns. So they will select a yarn. This is a bobbin. We put the bobbin onto the SAORI shuttle. Shuttle is not absolutely necessary, but it's helpful. I'm going to press down my left foot to open the shed, but it doesn't matter. You can press that on your right foot and weave from the other way first. I use the ledge that is in front of the reed to hold the shuttle and to run it along the surface. That too is not totally necessary. The motion is then to switch feet, to open the other shed, to pull this beater bar forward. That just compresses the line of weaving. And then you put the shuttle through and to the other side. And that's the motion of this weaving. We have taught children as young as 4 to weave. We've taught people as old as 102. As you can see, it's a very sort of calming, rhythmical action. But what happens if someone can't reach the pedals? The 4-year-old couldn't, and there are some people who don't have the motor skills to do that. In that case, as you saw in the video, we're sitting next to the weaver, and we can manually push one harness down and then the other harness down to open the shed for them, just to make it easier for them to weave. This also takes a fair amount of bilateral coordination to do. So for people who have one-sided weakness, it can also be fairly motivating to do. Some people don't have the coordination. They will get opening, they'll close, and then they will slide it back through without changing the shed. What that does is it sort of unweaves. But, you know, we might point that out to them, but that's not really a problem. It's just a different way of weaving. And what you end up with is a double weft strand, so slightly thicker weaving at that point. Other people, instead of going back through, will loop around. They just like the feel of this. And again, it's not a mistake. It's just a different way of weaving. And some people really like the texture. What if you want to change colors? That's easy. You just have the one and get a second color, put it on. Slide this through. So, and then you just start again with a different color. Some people have trouble with the shuttle. You have to hold on to it. And some people can't reach this back rim and they will start going, but they will make sort of loops through the warp. Again, this is a different way of weaving. It's weaver's choice. It's not an error. And it gives you these, what we call floats. And sometimes we use those floats as a design element. Some people can't reach the beater bar to pull it back. It takes a fair amount of arm extension and ability to grasp. So what we can do, I mean, we can obviously move it for them, but we like people to be as independent as possible. So we will just thread a ribbon through the reed and let them use this to pull. The range of motion is much less, so it gives them agency. Our goal is to provide as much support as people need in order to weave their own creations. Every SAORI studio has usually a large box or bag of ends of yarns that we have woven with and cut off. This is just a small amount of the stuff that I have in my own house. So what you do, we call this the treasure box, because you can take a mass of this and just put it in with your fingers, smash it down, and then continue to weave. What this does is it adds a lot of texture and also color. There's also something called roving. This is unspun fiber, which you can also use. You can make something very thin, or you can sort of ball it up. Now, instead of always using the beater bar to push things down, you can also use your fingers or a comb. Some weavers I know only use their fingers. They never use this. This allows you the ability to go around lumps, so you're not always doing something totally horizontal. You can also vary the spacing between the weft threads, so you can make sort of a very loose pattern. Again, it doesn't matter how you want to do it. It's fun. You can weave with, let's roll this back a little bit. A little more space. You can weave with all sorts of things. This is a piece of an old shirt I had. So you can just stick that in and then continue to weave. If somebody does something like this and decides they don't like it, you can just pull it out, sort of pull it out. You can weave with almost anything. You can weave with plastic bags, you can weave with paper. I can also weave with some old pieces of something I've woven that has the warp string still attached. People often like to have things hanging down. They like to have the edges maybe a little less organized than I like them. But again, it's weaver's choice. Whatever they want to do is great. When we are weaving in a group with a single warp, we will often mark on the segment that somebody wove, just so we know where their piece was. If we're making this into a communal banner, then they can proudly point to how much they did for the banner. The hospital, and Brian Hawks will soon tell you about our program there, we would label the pieces and then we would weave a space above and below so that when we took the warp off, we could sew or keep those edges stable and cut between. And then we can use pieces, we can accumulate them we could make a bracelet, we could get another piece and make a little pouch, but it just gives the child or adult, something to hold on to, something tangible that they made. And I can't tell you how powerful that is for people. Now I'm going to stop this share and move on and share one more picture with you. This is a picture of a loom. So for the people who have trouble with the shuttle, moving it along through the shed, we have a piece that we can put on that is a shuttle shelf. So here's the shuttle, this little boat-like thing. This has baffles on either side, you can see here, that keep the shuttle aligned with the reed. There's this loop at the end, which keeps the shuttle from falling off the ends. And people can just tap the shuttle and slide it through. So again, it's a way of making it easier for people to weave. That's what we want. And now I'm going to introduce you to Raya Hawks, who is our president of SAORI Arts NYC and co-founder.
Thanks for demonstrating the weaving on the loom, Maureen, and some of the adaptive measures that can make it easier for people with disabilities, as well as all individuals to weave. The flower petal on the lower right corner, I'm using my pointer, was woven on a paper plate, and I'll share with you who's weaving on paper plates now. To me, this flower petal is an example of the joy created by circle weaving. Maureen has demonstrated the SAORI weaving method, and I'm going to share with you our SAORI Arts programs and projects, our Weaving to Heal and Empower. Before COVID, and we're just beginning to initiate this again, we weave in person on the loom that Maureen demonstrated, or sometimes on paper plates as well in person, but the loom is our primary vehicle. We also do Zoom programs and we circle weave, we do tapestry weavings, and we also either Zoom or do in-person weavings one-on-one. SAORI Arts was founded in 2015, and our first project was a fundraising fashion show. SAORI Arts NYC purchased some textiles created in SAORI Hirobi, a SAORI textile weaving studio in Japan that weaves with people with disabilities. Brandy, who is a fiber artist and modestly didn't mention that she's an incredible fashion designer, had many friends when she was living in New York who were excited to make garments with the fabric that she shared with them. SAORI Arts NYC collaborated with local fashion designers in New York City to construct some of the fabric into clothes. In this picture, you can see where the arrow is. Those are fabrics that were woven in Japan. They're about 30 meters long. Tenri had a very high ceiling. And what you don't see on the wall were made into garments here. These garments were modeled in a fashion show and then on display at the Tenri Gallery in Greenwich Village. One of our first partners for weaving to promote healing and comfort was with Children's Hospital of New York. We wove there 2 days a week. I do have a disclosure. If you've been to some talks, you have to disclose your connections. Before I co-founded SAORI Arts NYC, I was a pediatric nurse practitioner in the Division of Pediatric Oncology, Hematology, and Bone Marrow Transplant at Children's Hospital. In the first clip, you saw I asked a boy, what would you like to weave today? Most children say a pillow or a purse, or I'm not really sure. This boy quite demonstratively said a dog. I had woven with him before, so I knew how talented he was and what he could do. I personally had no idea how to weave a dog, and I'm like, oh my God, I was on video, I had to be calm, I had to be cool, and I knew that he had a vision and he would lead the way. And it was just amazing. We did talk a little bit about it. Put this here. Where do you want the felt? What color do you want next? I cut the dog off carefully when it was finished, and sewed it onto a t-shirt for him, which he wore to many clinic visits after that. Sometimes we have fabric that, as I said, doesn't have a purpose at the start, but we also can suggest things to make. And here in the left-hand corner, you see an animal that was made to snuggle and provide further comfort. We weave with all members of the family, and a mother wove this cloth to be an animal for her son, which he loved, and everyone in the clinic then wanted one. We had to go on an animal kick. This skirt was made by a child about 8 years old who was a frequent flyer in the clinic and was seen once a month. Well, she came to clinic once a week, and we wove with her for an hour a week. And during this time, she was waiting for the results of her blood work and subsequent treatment. Her goal, as I said, was to weave enough fabric to make a skirt. We would save her work each week until she had enough. And you can see here, just the little patches, we would label it and save them. And then when she was finished, we would sew them all together. This is the back of the skirt. We had a sewist. Chandrina is a wonderful sewist, and she made this skirt complete with a lining and an expandable belt. And she wore it proudly in clinic for many weeks after. We had several other organizations that we partnered with, but once COVID forced us all into isolation, we had to find another way to follow our mission. We developed programs that we could offer on Zoom to continue to offer weaving as an empowering form of art. ARC, or AHRC, is an example of one of our new virtual partners. AHRC is an organization that serves people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in New York City. The SAORI weaving process that we utilized for virtual programming was initially weaving on a circle loom or a plate. So on the upper left-hand corner, it's just a regular paper plate. We put notches in it, and then we teach how to weave, how to make the warp. So this part of weaving process, this is called the warp. And you can see that people, we sent them woven paper plates with warps on them. But eventually, over time, we were able to teach the artists on Zoom how to make the warp themselves. And you could see they did make some of their own different warps, and they wove in their own special way. We weave every Thursday with 2 different groups of clients for AHRC, a group of people with traumatic brain injury, and a group of people with developmental and intellectual difficulties. Men and women enjoy this activity equally. Another organization that we work with a different type of project is called IAHD, or Institute of Applied Dynamics. Their mission is to positively impact the lives of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. IAHD has a very active arts program, and it's actually run by an art therapist. They requested something different from us. They asked that we teach their staff who work with patients, who work with their clients, to learn how to weave. And then they in turn would teach the clients how to weave. Meet Elizabeth. She became one of their most prolific and inventive weavers. Another program is barrier-free living. Barrier-free living is an example of another stretch of the way we work with people, not just those who live in centers with disabilities, but barrier-free living is nationally recognized as the first fully accessible emergency shelter for survivors of domestic violence with disabilities. We offer weaving as part of their support services, fitting under their umbrella of empowerment, advocacy, and hope. Their art classes encourage the use of found objects, which fit well with SAORI weaving, as Maureen demonstrated. Our first 4-week program with them was tapestry weaving on a handmade cardboard loom, which Brandy will demonstrate at the end of the program. And you can see here that this weaver chose thin fibers, fat fibers, soft fibers, wispy fibers. She then added in some beads that she had, and she loved what she had done, which was a seascape. She then went out to a store, probably Joann's or Michael's, and bought a seahorse and then sewed it on. So you can use things that you have on hand, or you can think of what you want and go out and purchase it and sew it on as well. Here are a few more examples from this program. Here, there's a way of splitting the warp, and looks like she's got quite a cute creature going on there. This is the cover of, it's a netting that's used to cover, say, blueberries in a box. Take off the netting and sew that in. She used other netting, other wispy fibers. I think the creature is rather cute. This one demonstrates, again, creating space inside. And here the person must have had or went out to purchase a butterfly to add to her piece. In addition to partners, and we have several others, we want to offer public programs, and we started a series of webinars in the spring of 2021. The webinars are a series of online live talks featuring SAORI weavers in conversation with curators, critics, and fellow artists. Here is an example of one webinar. This is where we have 2 SAORI artists who actually met in New York at Loop of the Loom. Juliet Martin is on the right, and Yael Batiahach, who is in Israel now, is on the left. And together they wove for on Zoom for an international webinar. They shared their unique relationship to SAORI weaving on this webinar. Juliet shared that she is bipolar, and Yael shared that she has a hearing loss and dystonia, which is a neuromuscular disorder. They talked about how weaving was a life-changing art form to them. Another way we're reaching out to the public is through exhibitions. Here you see Nobu Tsurata. She was on our first webinar series and spoke with Eric Shiner, then the executive director of Pioneer Works in Brooklyn. Spirituality, nature, sustainability are key elements of Nobu's weaving. And right now in September, in conjunction with Textile Month, many of Nobu's works are on exhibition at the Loop of the Loom, which is in Dumbo. Loop of the Loom is I think it's the only SAORI certified studio in the tri-state area. And there are 2 branches, one on 87th Street on the east side of Manhattan and one in Dumbo. Juliet, who you saw on the previous slide about webinars, is also a SAORI artist. She is quite established in the field. She was a graphic designer and sometimes incorporates graphic design into some of her tapestries. Juliet is having a show on October 21st at Dumbo for the entire month. The reception will be on August 9th. I hope some of you can get to see the show. And many of her items, if not all, are on sale. And 1/3 of the proceeds will go to benefit SAORI Arts. Thank you, Juliet. Again, I told you in the beginning that we work with individuals, either in person or on Zoom. And I wove with Raina at Sister Pat's Kids Camp for children with cancer and life-threatening blood disorders, where SAORI Arts NYC runs a weaving program. The 7 days sleepaway camp was closed last summer, and this year it opened for 7 days just as a day camp, where there were many activities many of them were one-on-one. You may remember that it was very hot in July, at the end of July, which was our week there. And Raina was too uncomfortable to weave outside. She came to me and said, Raya, I can't do it anymore. I'm like, oh, thank God, because I can't either. So we found the only air-conditioned room at the camp. We were able, as Maureen demonstrated, 2 of us were able to carry in the loom into this hidden oasis of air. And the 2 of us wove for over an hour. And you can see that we brought some yarn with us, and that she did quite a bit of weaving which is really quite beautiful. Raina has allowed me to tell her story and to show her picture. Grace also has allowed me to share her story. She is a 17-year-old girl who is a survivor of a brain tumor. She has multiple developmental and motor difficulties as a result of the tumor and treatment. COVID isolation was very difficult for her because she missed her school friends terribly. One of her doctors who knew about SAORI weaving and our Zoom work asked if it would be okay if I went on Zoom with her. Her mother thought it was a fine idea. She regularly has someone to help her with the technical aspects and occasionally has someone to help her with the physical aspects. And we weave once a week. She, as I said, may need a little help with the physical aspects, but she is the designer. She chooses the color. She decides what she wants to make. She made several flowers, which she sent to her friends whom she missed. I've illustrated many of the benefits of SAORI weaving on the previous slides, but I want to show them a little more clearly. For many weavers, we create community to combat isolation as well as increase coping skills. This is a screenshot, again with permission, from AARC, where we weave. You can see Maureen is a teaching artist, Jane is a teaching artist. We have another teaching artist over there, Benny. Sometimes we can take some of the people out into in a private Zoom room if they're having some difficulty with the technical aspects. We bring them all together and you can see that they really enjoy sharing their objects that they've made. As you can imagine, creating a community and teaching how to weave can combat isolation, increase coping techniques, and decrease stress and anxiety. SAORI weaving also engages many of the 5 senses. For example, touch. There are many different types of yarn, and it's not really demonstrated too clearly in this, but you can see some of the yarn is fuzzy. This is a metallic yarn. This was a soft yarn. This is a card that somebody made out of a circle weaving. There are soft yarn, stiff yarn, thick yarn, as well as recycled products that can be touched and manipulated. The stimulation of the senses encourages the creative pieces that are made by weaving. We've also worked with weavers with low vision. Touch is a very important component of their weaving, especially if they have no memory of seeing color or color is distorted. But there is a rich conversation that can evolve around color from touch and memory. To continue to talk about sight, the array of colors combined with the richness of the textures can stimulate weavers' energy and creativity. Weavers are encouraged to look around their environment, to look at things that they can weave with that are right there and put them into their piece. The sight of all the objects that can be used in weaving can stimulate the weaving process and can be exhilarating. I have just behind me, you can probably see a lot of cones of yarn. I have yarns everywhere. It takes me a really long time to decide what I want, and that's true for many other weavers. Sound is another sight that's stimulated, and it wasn't quite clear on the video, but when you put your foot down, you put the shuttle in, you pull back you take the shuttle out, you pull back the reed, you change your foot. That's what you do over and over, and that has a very rhythmic sound. That sound is quite calming, and it can cast a spell almost over a zen-like feeling that you have when you're weaving. Being taught how to weave using the SAORI method, where there are no mistakes and there's beauty without intention. It nurtures creativity and self-expression. I think you can see this in the piece that Elizabeth made that I showed earlier. For all weavers, self-esteem is enhanced by the response of the people around them to their beautiful weaving. This is a traumatic brain injury group, and you can see the smile in the faces. And you don't have to show your face, you can just show your work and people can talk about it. So it's a very wonderful way for all weavers to have their self-esteem amplified. Last but not least, for many weavers with physical disabilities, they may experience pain. Sometimes the distraction of weaving and the engagement remove the consciousness of the physical pain as well as the emotional pain. It can be a Zen-like experience and you are transformed into the now. This is a piece of weaving that I did with a woman whose daughter was dying of a brain tumor, an infant child. I brought the loom into the room at her request. We had done some weaving previously, and she brought in some pieces of clothing that belonged to her baby. These two little guys were on her little slippers. This is something from the onesie, the snaps from the onesie. She also went shopping and she bought, she made a ball out of woving, and she bought some ribbon, and she said that her child brought her sunlight into her life, and she was very happy to have this as a living memory of her child. As I mentioned briefly, we want to do sewing with Raina, so we've started some sewing with Brandy as the tailor and sewist, and here we've taught Raina how to sew a skirt, and hopefully she will soon be able to sew the weaving that she made into a skirt. Then one other way of reaching out has been exclusive partnerships. Brandy, through her relationship with fashion community, has introduced Volta Atelier to our fabric. Volta Atelier makes 100% hand-stitched upcycle leather handbags. Discarded leather from accessories from factories are used by skilled artisans to weave these handbags. Volta Atelier really loved our fibers, and they wanted to collaborate with us in a partnership where they designed the bag made out of the fiber and then gave us the bags. They gave us the leather for the handles, and voila, we made a bag that's available for sale on our website. Thank you for your attention. I know sometimes it was a bit like a talk, but I hope you could appreciate the work that the weavers did and some ideas of how it's beneficial. We also want to share the beauty of the fiber and the pride of the weavers. We continue to look for new partners while we embrace the old. We welcome your comments, questions, and collaborative proposals at the end of our program. So Brandy, why don't you come back and join? I'll stop the share.
Hello, everyone. Hope that gives you a really strong idea of our programming and what we've been up to since the founding of our nonprofit. So I'm gonna just move my screen really quickly and do a quick demo of weaving on a cardboard loom. Like Ryan and Maria were saying, during COVID, we transitioned to virtual for our workshops. So we were embracing the SAORI philosophy, but using found materials that are really easily accessible in our own homes, and also sending kits to some of our partnerships. So here is a piece of cardboard, just any plain piece of cardboard. This is actually a little yogurt packaging that I had saved that I found it around my house. And this is pre-warped. And like I was saying, I'm gonna just do a very brief demo, but I encourage you all to look at our website because we have a lot of how-to tutorials and videos that you can follow along for different projects that we've been working on with our programming. So this is one of them. So like I was saying, this is pre-warped, and I like to put a little pencil to have a little bit of space between the warp. It makes it slightly easier to use between the warp and the cardboard, right? So you can kind of move this however way. It doesn't matter either way if you want to move it down or at the top. It's really embracing the SAORI philosophy where even this form of weaving, I'm just gonna move this a little bit further down. It's similar with the loom that Maureen was showing you, that you can start left to right, you can start in the middle, you know, you can cut your yarn up, like it really is up to you. There's no right or wrong way. Whoops, there's no right or wrong way to weave. So here I have a bunch of different materials. I have some pieces of yarn that I cut. I have some ribbon, some little sparkly ribbon, some fabric strips. I love weaving with fabric. This is something that I actually hand dyed, and they just kept the little scraps. This is wool roving. So I'll show you how you can weave with all these materials. So You can just do this manually by hand. So again, so you can start left to right either way, where let's say this is my yarn here. I'm going to go under one of the warp threads and then over the warp thread right next to it and under. See, I'm just kind of pushing my fingers and then over, and you can pull the yarn at any point. It's maybe a little easier to see. Ooh, see, I have a little knot there, but I'm going to embrace that because I like that. And then you can move your yarn, anywhere along your loom. So these are really the fundamentals of weaving. Some of you may be weavers and you know the fundamentals of this textile form already, but your loom, you've got your warp, and then you have what's called your weft. That's really what it comes down to. And just that rhythm, that up and down motion is very meditative. So I'll just do a little bit more. We can go over, under. Also, if you don't want to use your fingers, or if it's a little bit challenging to do that, what I like to do, you can use a bobby pin. Oops. This, or you can use a tapestry needle, or you can use a safety pin too, which I'll show you in a few minutes, where it's easy to attach to larger pieces like the fabric strips. But let's say you kind of want to switch over, you can just stick the yarn in the bobby pin, and it just makes it a little bit easier to guide the yarn over and under your warp. So you can pull this, you can leave the ends, similar to what Maureen was doing on the SAORI loom, right? Or you can also tuck these back in at any point. Totally up to you. And then when you finish a row, or you can again start like halfway, you don't have to go the full length of your warp. But now what you want to do is you want to go the opposite direction. So let's say you have the yarn under your last warp thread. Now you're going to go over and then under, over, under. See a little bit clearer, right? Here's under, you over, under, so that when you pull your yarn, it's going to catch at the end, right? Let me just do a little bit more. And you can change your colors at any point. You don't have to use the full length of yarn. So let's say this is, you're like, okay, that's all. I just want a little bit of orange. And you can just cut that off. You can also tie another piece in a knot to your existing one, or you can leave it. Either way is fine. And you can also have spaces in your warp too, or you can make it a tight weaving like this. So the yarn pieces are right on top of each other. I mean, the fun of it, especially with the SAORI philosophy, is that you really get to play and be experimental and imaginative, and you don't always have to have a concept in mind beforehand, which I find to be really freeing. Some people do, that's fine too. If you have an idea that you want to create, but then also the discoveries throughout the weaving process can be really exciting. So let's say you have a little piece of fabric that you want to weave. So then I'm going to put a little safety pin at the end. So it's just a little bit bulkier. It can be a little bit easier to weave with. So let's say I'm like, maybe I'll push this up. And then you start weaving again. I'm using the safety pin as a guide. I go over, under, and then pull this through. And see how nice, I like having the different textures, the kind of thickness versus the thinness of the yarn too. But I've certainly made, weavings that are just with yarn as well. So anything goes. Go over, under, and then you just go back the way you came, but in the opposite direction as far as going over and under your warp threads. Right, so it kind of catches like that. And then you can just leave that. You don't have to weave the whole extent. I kind of like to have some of the fringe sometimes, just adds different textures. And then I like to use also wool roving. I'm going to push this up. And with our partners, we like to encourage lots of different materials as well, because some people may prefer this kind of fluffy wool roving, or they like the sparkly, more colorful yarns to stand out, things like that. So want to encourage as much of that play as possible. So for something like this, you could just stick in anywhere and kind of weave that in as well to make some sculptural forms. There you can kind of push that. So really nice to touch. Some other textures in there. And then you can finish it off with whatever material is some of the sparkly ribbon. Also, cutting up strips of plastic bags are great as well. Finding things in nature, like weaving with flowers, like anything that is kind of long and somewhat flexible, anything fibrous, right, can be put into your weaving. So I guarantee you have some things in your house. Or if you take a walk around the neighborhood, I'm sure you can find something you can weave with. So that's just a quick little demo. And again, I really encourage you to visit our website, take a look at some of the tutorials that we have. We've done some circle weaving, so using a paper plate, and then lots of cardboard weaving ideas. And then here are some finished jewelry pieces that I've made. So you can weave your findings. So let's say you want to make a necklace, you can weave that at the top or the bottom. And this is just some leather scrap strips that I have. And then I like to leave this fringe here. So this is the warp threads. So this would be kind of equivalent to the red here, just kind of leaving that long, or you can trim them as well. And you would just tie off your warp threads, but you can visit the videos for more of how to take the weaving off of the loom. And then we have these little earrings, kind of fun little funky ones. So you can find these findings at any craft store like Joann's, Michael's. You can order them online. Etsy has a ton of little shops too. It's easier to order online. Also vintage items too. You can take them apart. So if you want to, you know, or like found objects that can be little hooks. There's just so many things that you can do. And here's another jewelry piece, a little earring with, I kept the fringe of the warp, and I'm wearing one as well that has some beads. So yeah, just lots of things. You can cover it with fabric. This one, I think I glued the pieces on just to keep it flat, but you can hand stitch for those of you that are sewers. If you want to learn to hand sew, it can be really meditative as well. So that's the little demo for the cardboard loom. And we are going to go into the Q&A. I know some of you had some questions, though I think some of them answered throughout, but thank you so much for watching.